welcome you to the session on qualitative research methodology, which is an important component of social science research. Before I go into the details of the qualitative research methodology, I would like to bring certain clarifications on the terminology, because several social scientists and authors of books on research methodology have used these terms in different ways, but for the present I would like to consider that research methodology is an inclusive concept that refers to the entire research work in a particular framework, and also the practices by which data are collected in relation with the theory and the objectives of the study. It also includes tools of data collection and analysis and interpretation as well. Methodology also means the study of methods. That means it includes more than one method in a particular methodology. So therefore, under qualitative research methodology, we shall consider the broad framework, that is the paradigm in which qualitative research is being carried out. So far as the research method is concerned, most of the times it is seen that method and tool are one and the same. But here I would like to consider method is more than mere tool, because method also talks about the philosophical or logic under which a particular method is adopted in a particular research methodology, whereas the tool is only an instrument for collecting the relevant information. So keeping this distinction in mind, now I will discuss certain important aspects of qualitative research. First of all, let us consider what is qualitative research. Well, qualitative research is generally understood as a research which focuses on the quality of life, which is not amenable for quantification. In fact, it is very difficult to define, because it connects several ideas with reference to qualitative research. Nevertheless, as a simplest definition, we can see that qualitative research is about the quality of social life or social world. So it includes the aspirations of the people, emotions, motivations, relationships and reactions also to different situations and activities, and sometimes the reaction towards material and non-material objects also. Well, the human behavior also need to be understood in terms of thoughts and ideas and conceptualizations. So these are some of the things which are part and parcel of human society, which need to be understood, but it is better to understand these through the qualitative way rather than quantification. So therefore, now under this in this kind of definition, we shall look some aspects of qualitative research. Now, the nature of qualitative research. Qualitative research is organized in a natural setting. So it is naturalistic. It means to say that, like in the sciences, we cannot organize experiments in the human societies. Whatever naturally happening, these can be examined and understood. That is why qualitative research is naturalistic. Qualitative research also is holistic. It means that if you look at any social phenomena, we can see it in terms of different parts, and no part can be isolated and studied independently. it has to be understood in relation with other parts. For example, we want to study education. Well, education cannot be completely studied as an isolated aspect. It has to be studied in terms of economy, in terms of political decisions, and also it has to be seen in terms of the values, religious values and other aspects. Likewise, any social phenomena in qualitative research need to be examined and explained in terms of holism. Right. And very important aspect of qualitative research is to gain meaning given by the people in a particular context. In other words, it is the perspective of the people who are being studied. Right. And then when the perspective is to be considered, there will be several perspectives, because several respondents or several people will have their own opinions. So, this qualitative research considers all these kinds of opinions and then try to understand what is dominant opinion and other alternative opinions. And also it is to be seen that qualitative research engages the researcher also into the life of the people. So, therefore, it is an experiential research. That means, whatever the people experience, the real world, the researcher also experiences. So, the knowledge gained by the people is similar to the knowledge gained by the researcher as well. Right. Finally, we can see qualitative research makes an argument on the reality of social life. So, while making this argument, the qualitative researcher will have to describe, explain and argue the point of view of the researcher. So, therefore, it is basically a descriptive account. Coming to the philosophical foundation of qualitative research, it is believed that there exist multiple realities which are perceived by different people in different ways. Therefore, it is reasonable to approach the reality in its various forms from the perspectives of different individuals and their experiences. Right. And such a reality shall be approached by inductive reasoning. Also, it is argued that this inductive reasoning requires interpretation and explanation. And this interpretation and explanation comes from objective experience of the respondents and also the experience of the researcher. But it does not mean that there is no objectivity in this case, but the focus or emphasis or due importance is given to the subjective experiences. Now, after this philosophical foundation, we shall examine the important characteristics of qualitative research. Qualitative research provides an in-depth understanding of social world, because in the qualitative research, usually the researcher spends more time with the people and the community. That helps in proper understanding and or in-depth understanding of the world of the people. Right. As I already mentioned, in the qualitative research, it is the emic perspective, that is the perspective of insiders about the situation and the situation or the phenomena. In case of other kinds of researchers, mostly the researcher himself will have one kind of understanding and the interpretation goes according to the understanding of the researcher. But in case of qualitative research, the insider's view or perspective is given importance and due recognition. Since all the perspectives are considered, it generates very rich and complex and intricate data. Yes, these complex data need to be analyzed properly to get a deeper understanding. Another important character of qualitative research is it is empirical as well as open. It is done openly in the sense that there is no secrecy in this. It is a natural life and it is not a laboratory experiment. It is the empirical situation which are being studied. It is also emergent in the sense that as the investigation goes deep, without a strict path to adhere to, it is likely to bring forth new categories, new kind of understanding which has been not known to the researcher, sometimes even for the people. Also, another important character of qualitative research is context is more important in finding out the meaning, because meaning changes from context to context. Right. So, the social behavior need to be understood in terms of the context of the participants. Another important character of qualitative research is there is an active engagement of the researcher, which helps to get a subjective knowledge and also objective knowledge of the phenomena. So, qualitative research has a different kind of character as opposed to the quantitative research. Now, coming to the aspect of how qualitative research is practiced. So, it starts with usually a field work. A field work is not a casual field work, not a field trip, but it is well planned and organized field work. Since it is planned, there is a need to identify a location and also who are the informants, who are the people to be discussed. If these are the people, then there should be someone who will have to introduce the researcher, because the relationship between the researcher and the informants most of the time goes in a hierarchical or power-laden relationships. Therefore, suppose if a political authority introduces the researcher to the people, then the informants think in terms of the political aspect of it. If the researcher is introduced by a government official, then the informants construe that research is a government kind of research. So, therefore, it is need to identify who introduces the researcher so that the neutrality can be maintained. And at the same time, it is important to find out if this particular location is a representative of the entire population. Then it is needless to say there is an absolute need for rapport building, because most of the time researchers carry out their study in a strange group or a strange community. So, before the active research is undertaken, there is a need to build a good rapport with the informants, so that the informants feel comfortable to provide the information. It is sometimes suggested that it is better to go also in a native type. That means as the natives live, the researcher also required to live as the natives. That only helps to bridge a gap, if it exists, between the researcher and the community. So, identification with the community is very important, because that gives very comfort, that gives a comfort zone or creates a comfort zone where the researcher and the informants maintain cordial relationship. And it is also important taking notes either by hand or through technical devices. Another important thing in the practice of qualitative research is the researcher should raise questions why, because the why question leads to probing into the subject rather than how and what. Well, qualitative research also requires different kinds of techniques for data collection at different points of time. Therefore, the design for qualitative research is flexible. And we can also have to say that the qualitative researcher will have to be reflective. I mean, he or she cannot take any information on face value, rather the information need to be interrogated and reflected upon. Finally, qualitative research gives less importance on hypothesis testing. However, lower level hypotheses are developed and these are tested in the field itself. The next aspect of qualitative research is analysis of qualitative research. As I mentioned already, qualitative research is very complex. Then we have to weed out or segregate the data in terms of significance of the data in view of the objectives. Once the data has been identified, then we shall look for the categories according to the subject, according to the objects of the study. Well, sometimes in course of the study, the new categories also emerge. Right. Keeping these pre-established categories and the new categories, now we have to examine the relationships of these categories in terms of the objectives of the study. So, when you see the relationships of these categories, we can see the patterns of behavior, and these patterns of behavior have to be examined in the light of the theory. Now, we shall look at what are the major differences between qualitative and quantitative research. There is one similarity in both qualitative and quantitative research, that is, both of them focus on the empirical reality and both use few instruments in the same manner. For example, the interview technique is used in the quantitative study as well as in the qualitative study. Similarly, observation. Right. Qualitative study focuses on the in-depth of the information, whereas the quantitative study focuses on the large data, that is the quantity. In the qualitative research, no variable can be segregated or separated or suppressed, because it is done in a natural and open setting. But in case of quantitative research, certain variables which are considered interfering variables, these can be easily controlled. Another difference between these two researches is that hypothesis testing is not a major concern in qualitative research, but it is an important concern in quantitative research. Qualitative research, as I mentioned earlier, adapts flexible design and changes occur in the course of fieldwork. So, it is not problematic in its execution. In case of quantitative research adopts the fixed design. For example, it is a survey, then it fixes the sample and sample design. You cannot deviate from this survey design. Hence, it is not problematic so far as execution of the research is concerned. Now, let us turn to different traditions and paradigms adapted in qualitative research. One is ethnography. Basically, ethnography paradigm is used in anthropology to study cultures. Ethnos means people, graphy means description. It is a descriptive account of the culture of the people. Well, now ethnography is used not only to study culture, but different aspects of human life, not only of the primitive communities, but also contemporary societies. Next one is the phenomenology. Phenomenology as an important concept used in philosophy, and phenomenology is used to understand the experiences of the individuals. This is an experiential knowledge of the individual which may not be tested or which may not be ratified, but it is a subjective experience, and this subjective experience has a strong relationship with the human behavior. Another important tradition of qualitative research is ethnomethodology. Ethnomethodology is about the real life situations in which social order has been created by methods adapted people to be comfortable in a social situation. So, ethnomethodology is the study of people's own methods for their adaptation to the social world. Now, the next important tradition in qualitative research is conversational analysis. So, in conversational analysis, it has been pointed out that the individuals create a social order. So, conversations do not take place in a chaotic manner. It is organized in terms of shared knowledge and also rules and regulations. So, conversational analysis helps to understand the human behavior through the conversations. Similarly, there is another tradition, discourse analysis. Discourses are very common in different areas. You will find political discourses, you will find religious discourses, you will find other social discourses, and important issues of social life most of the times are put in discourses, and people understand the social norms, social values which guide the behavior of the people. Fine. Next tradition, we can see protocol analysis, which is adapted in understanding the psychological behavior of individuals. There is another kind of tradition, it is called interpretive phenomenological analysis. So, the philosophers use this interpretive phenomenological analysis for understanding the experiences of the individuals, and this has to be described so that the different behaviors of individuals can be meaningfully understood. There is another important tradition in qualitative research is symbolic interactionism. In symbolic interactionism, individuals or groups interact either verbally or non-verbally in a symbolic framework, and these symbols and their meanings are constructed, created through these symbolic actions. So, the symbolic actions and the meanings are to be understood in a particular context, in a particular cultural background. There is another important paradigm in qualitative research. This is the grounded theory. The grounded theory, unlike the previous theories, sociological theories particularly, which are not based on empirical studies, but the grounded theory argues that the sociological theories have to be developed in terms of the empirical realities. So, the grounded theory lays down a method, a systematic approach, how the categories to be identified in the ground realities, and from these categories the social theories can be developed. Then ethnogenics. So, ethnogenics talks about relationship, the racial characters and the behaviors of different groups in different parts of the world. Then there is another tradition which is a philosophical tradition called hermeneutics. The hermeneutics has a long tradition wherein the texts are interpreted in relation with the different parts of the text. So, an understanding comes from a part of the text, but that is extended to the whole text and then comes back to the original part. So, this is a kind of textual analysis, and the way people understand it and experience it and explain it, this is an important qualitative research. Then narrative analysis. In the narrative could be a story, narrative could be fiction, narrative could be of life experience, or it could be related to health experience or environmental experiences. So, the narrative analysis necessarily considers the experiences and the feelings and the opinions of individual or group. Then there is another tradition called constructionism. Well, the idea is that social reality is always constructed, but what is absolute reality is very uncertain. So, the reality is always understood in terms of construction. There is another kind of tradition which is called critical theory. So, in this critical theory, there are other kinds of sub-branches like feminist research or Marxist research, disability research, and critical race theory and queer theory. So, all these theories question the traditional wisdom and traditional conceptualization of society, gender, and classes, other aspects of the society. Then we shall also see the participatory action research. The participatory action research usually related to the aspect where the beneficiaries are the community participates in a research program and provides inputs and also share their knowledge with the researcher. Finally, there is a user-led research. Some researchers are initiated with the objective of end results, because most of the researchers are carried out for theory building or better understanding of human behavior, which may not have any application value, but this particular research is objectively, necessarily leading to making use of the findings of the research. To conclude, now we can see qualitative research is a very broad framework or paradigm in which you can find different methods, more than one method sometimes, right, under the broader framework, right, being influenced or under consideration of a particular theory, and the tools and techniques for data collection, and the data analysis and interpretation of the data.